Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, hello, as you filter in. We'll be starting shortly. I'm just going to leave a couple of minutes for everybody to join the session as Zoom queues you all up and pops you into this live session. Good afternoon to everyone that's just joined.
Yeah.
Please do feel free to get involved, use the chat function, let us know who you are, where you're joining from, and maybe if you've got better weather than we have here. It's very grey here. As I say, we'll be kicking off about 2 minutes past, just giving a little bit more time for people to filter through into the session. Yeah, panel, what's the weather like with you? You got any sunshine where you are?
No, none at all. Drizzly.
Yeah,
uniformly grey.
pretty great.
Yeah. Surprise, surprise, it's raining and windy in Scotland. Surprise, surprise.
From Wales.
At least it's not snow. I did see that potentially forecast for the next couple of weeks, so hopefully we'll escape that. Hi everyone, saying hello in the chat. Lovely to see you. Thank you for joining this afternoon. Yeah, we've got gloomy in London.
I saw somebody saying they were in Ardrossan. It's been a while since I've been there.
Yeah, it's nice. We've got a good spread from all over, it seems.
Yeah. Jealous of anyone who's by the sea though.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to kick off. We've got a good number of people that have joined. Lovely to see everyone saying hello through the chat. So thank you again for spending time with us today. For the next hour or so, we will be talking about exactly what you can do to give every apprentice the best chance of success. And I'm very excited because I'm joined by an expert panel with an absolute ton of real life experience. So I know all of us are busy. Maybe you're from an HR background or a talent background like myself. You're definitely not here for a sales pitch. So what we'll make sure we do is give you tons and tons of things to try, tips and tricks, so that as soon as you get back to your desk or switch screens after this, you can start putting that in action. So I will introduce our panel. We have Emily Austin. Would you like to introduce yourself, Emily?
Yeah, hi, I'm Emily Austin. I am the Engagement Director for the Association of Apprentices.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks for joining us today. We have Angelica Yamansky.
Hey everybody, I'm the Senior Marketing and Engagement Officers at Apprentice. We're a shared apprenticeship scheme operating in Southeast Wales.
Thank you. And Hannah Payne.
Hi everybody, I'm Hannah Payne. I'm a previous level 2 and level 3 business administration apprentice and also the skills development coordinator at World Skills UK.
Thanks, Hannah. And Paul Devoy.
Hi, I'm Paul Devoy. I'm the Chief Executive of Investors and People.
Thanks, Paul. And last but not least, myself. I'm Beth Sampson. I'm the People Lead at Investors and People. So I work alongside Paul to look after our internal team and network of practitioner consultants. You can summarise the economic and political issues around apprentices at the moment.
So you went silent there. Beth, was that me you were asking?
Oh dear, I must have angered the Zoom gremlins. Yes, I thought if we could go to you first, Paul, just to paint us a picture of the landscape around apprentices right now.
Yeah, so it's an interesting time for anyone who's recruiting and developing people at the moment. As we know from the economy, there's a huge challenge around about staff retention and recruitment, and most organisations are identifying a huge number of skills gaps and shortages. What's really interesting though is if you look at the value of the UK's human capital, that's how the ONS define the value of all of our collective skills and abilities. It's worth £21.4 trillion. That's twice the value of our tangible assets, all our buildings and infrastructure, etc. So when you hear glib statements from CEOs saying people are our biggest asset, while it might be glib, it's actually true. But in the UK, we don't invest enough in our people. And all the metrics back that up. We're not as productive as our G7 competitors. So a French worker can go home on a Thursday night having produced the same amount as a UK worker takes in 5 days. Now, there's a whole load of reasons for why that's the case, but I'll just highlight two that's relevant to what we're going to talk about today. One is, in the UK, we don't invest enough in leadership and management training. So therefore, as a result, our organisations aren't as well managed as our competitor nations. The other thing that we don't do is invest properly in our own skills and development of our own workforce. We have lots of people going through higher education. I think when I left school, about 5% of people were going through higher education, and now it's something like 50%. But the issue is we don't utilise their skills effectively in the workplace. So there's over 4 million people in the UK in jobs that don't properly fully utilise their skills and experience. And also over the last 10 years, the number of apprenticeship starts has dropped significantly. It's dropped from around about 450,000 down to 320,000. So we're not taking on enough apprentices. And the completion rates of those apprenticeships have dropped significantly as well over the last couple of years. And there's some technical reasons why that's the case. So I guess the picture I'm painting is, at an economic level, there is a real shortage of skilled people in the labour market. Employers are really struggling to find the right. We know that our people are our most valuable asset, but we don't invest enough in them. And if we do that, all the research shows that organisations who invest in people in the long run are more productive, have a more engaged workforce, and are more sustainable in the long term. So what we're advocating today is that apprenticeships are an absolutely fantastic tool, but a very underutilised tool to address a lot of the skills gaps and shortages that the economy is facing at the moment. And some of those skills gaps and shortages are nothing new. If you go back and look at the employer skills survey from 2002, you could almost take the cover off of that one and put the cover of the 2017-18 labour skills survey over the top of it. It paints a very similar picture. There was a shortage of chefs in 2002. There was a shortage of people with STEM skills in 2002. There was a shortage of people in parts of agriculture and manufacturing in 2002. And similarly, the dial hasn't moved. So the definition of insanity is keeping doing the same thing and expecting different results. We have to think differently about how we invest in our people, how we create more opportunities, good opportunities for apprenticeships, and support those apprentices to complete and then progress within the organisation. If we do that and we utilise a really important lever that apprenticeships are, we've got a good chance to address some of these persistent skills gaps and shortages the economy faces.
Thanks, Paul. And Emily, in your position as Director at Association of Apprentices, could you fill us in a little bit more about some of the economic and political factors at play currently?
Yeah, so thanks, Beth. I think there's a couple of things really. One, from the employers and training providers we talk to, I don't think there's necessarily a reluctance to participate in apprenticeships, but more that there's some barriers that exist that make it really difficult for them to do. And if you think where business is at as a result of sort of post-COVID, etc., it's not probably top of particularly small businesses' agendas. So some of the barriers, we hear are things like the perception of time that it takes to manage an apprentice, the administration involved, the costs involved, etc. But there's so much research that says actually, despite those costs and despite the time that you might perceive, actually the benefits outweigh that. And so the St Martin's Group did some research recently. 98% of employers who currently employ apprentices cite benefits, additional benefits, and those benefits, the top one was actually filling critical skills shortages. So I think, yes, there is some investment. That's, apprenticeships aren't the only solution, and sometimes they're quite resource hungry, we know that, and they can cost, but actually the benefits outweigh that. I think from an apprentice perspective, also, Paul, you referenced completions, but we're starting to see some trends with apprentices, particularly now people have come back into the workplace, they're catching up post-COVID. They've also got their apprenticeship pressures as well, and the two aren't neatly sort of marrying together. And actually what a lot of training providers are reporting, actually there's lots of safeguarding escalations around mental health So there's a big concern at the moment around support that we give to those current apprentices to help them complete, because actually the pressure and the stress is on more so than ever. From a sort of political perspective, the people that we talk to from the association, everything at the moment is very much geared around the apprentice experience. So it's really important, obviously, that employers and training providers are well supported to actually provide those apprenticeships and do so in a simplified way. But actually everything is geared around how do you give somebody that really great experience that they can go on to complete and then realise all the benefits that they should do once they've attained. So it's quite a complex environment, Paul, I think, isn't it, at the moment, I should say. And so it's really important that we can do everything collectively as possible to give apprentices the best chance of a successful outcome.
Absolutely, thanks, Emily. And just by being here today, we're already making a start. So yes, we've all experienced a huge amount of change over the last 12 to 18 months. I hesitated to use the word unprecedented. I think that's been overused. So let's hear from you in the audience. We've got a poll for you. Over the last 12 months, has your apprentice engagement level increased or decreased or stayed the same? Just give it a couple of minutes so everyone has a chance to answer. I think we're about halfway. Okay, we're up to 76%. Anybody else? Now's your chance to get in. Okay, and before I reveal the answer, let's hear from you in the chat. What percentage do you think of the audience today say that the engagement has increased over the last 12 months? Let's see some numbers. I can't say there's a prize for the one that's closest, but. Okay, 5, 35, 5. Some 10s. Kelly, I see you put 40. Okay, if we can reveal the answers. So Kelly, you were almost spot on. 41% of you today think that engagement's increased in the last 12 months, but 26% of you feel that it's decreased, and then about a third said it stayed the same. So I think it's excellent that we've got the topic that we have today, and hopefully, like I said, we'll give you some really clear actions to take home. So what I'll do now is go to you, Hannah, and just explore your journey as an apprentice a little bit, what your tips are, and what were your kind of moments of joy along the journey.
Thanks, Beth. So as I said, yeah, I'm Hannah Payne. I am a previous level 2 and level 3 business administration apprentice. I actually finished my qualification back in June of last year, and then I've been in my current role at World Skills UK, where I actually completed both of my apprenticeships for around about 18 months now, and I'm now the skills development coordinator. So during my apprenticeship, I actually had a really great experience. I obviously learnt the skills that I needed. I was able to have a lot of experience in the workplace, especially with that 20% off the job training. I had a great relationship with my training provider and my assessor. And I also had a really good relationship with my line manager, who also supported me obviously throughout my journey to then complete my apprenticeship. I think apprenticeships are a great way, obviously, to kickstart your career. You know, you learn them skills, you gain that experience in the workplace, as well as obviously getting paid a wage. So I think they're a great opportunity, and I think it is really important for employers and training providers to provide them opportunities and increase that engagement with apprentices to allow them to then officially obviously finish and get their qualification. So just from some of the findings from that poll, it is quite interesting. I know just from speaking to fellow apprentices and some apprentices that I know who have finished their apprenticeship, sometimes it can be quite hard to stay engaged in your apprenticeship, and you know, with the responsibilities of obviously having your qualification and doing that side of the apprenticeship, as well as obviously your work responsibilities and day-to-day responsibilities, it can really be quite stressful. So I I really do think that something that employers can do to really improve the engagement of their apprentices is just to take it right to the beginning and right to the start of the apprentice's journey, and to really understand the requirements, the time and the commitment of an apprenticeship. As Emily said, there is obviously a stigma that it does take a lot of time and a lot of commitment and a lot of money, and obviously that isn't the case. But where there is obviously certain requirements from an employer point of view, as well as the training provider, I think it is just really important just to understand what is needed and what support is needed there for apprentices, just to make sure that they obviously feel supported throughout their journey. And just from my experience, to do that, I think having inductions into the organisation. So again, taking it right from the start. When that apprentice joins your organisation, what can you do at the start of that journey to really, settle them in, get them to understand the organisation, to then kickstart their apprenticeship? So some experiences that I had in my apprenticeship, when I started, I had inductions, and I had inductions from different departments. So I actually met with each department head across the organisation, and they explained to me what they did, what their role was in the organisation, what their whole department did, what their goals were, what their objectives, and how they obviously then worked as an organisation to then meet objectives as a whole. So that really gave me a really good insight into each of the departments, and obviously how as an apprentice I fit into the organisation. I think as well, understanding the 20% off the job training hours are quite important. So with these sort of responsibilities of an employer, I think it's quite important to sit down with the training provider at the start of their apprentice. One, that is to obviously build a relationship with the training provider, but secondly, also provides that apprentice that feeling that you're really interested in what they need to do, and that you're making the effort and you're giving the time to obviously speak to your training provider, and that then gives the apprentice a bit more trust, and they feel that they can communicate with you openly because you're actually invested and you're creating that culture where they feel that they're obviously valued in the organisation. And as part of that is obviously understanding again what the time commitment is of an apprentice. And my line manager, she would come into my weekly meetings with my training provider, even if it was just 5 minutes at the end. This provided, again, that reassurance to me that they obviously value me as an employee, as an apprentice, but also are interested in ways that they could help me and support me. And that really gave me confidence in my employer, as well as myself, that they are interested. And one thing that was highlighted from my training provider to my employer was, obviously it's really important for apprentices to manage their workload, as well as obviously their work for the qualification. So I sat down with my line manager and we openly discussed and had open communication about how we can get past the barriers, of having quite a few different responsibilities. We come to the conclusion that putting time aside for myself to focus on my apprenticeship and my qualification work was really important. So I was able to basically focus on day-to-day responsibilities of my role within the organisation, and then I had half a day, or depending obviously on what I needed to do that week, or a full day working from home. And I know that can be quite difficult in small organisations, but it doesn't obviously have to have that much commitment and that much time put aside. But just put in 2 hours or half a day aside for apprentices to really focus on getting the study work of the apprenticeship completed, then releases them for the rest of the week. And it provides, that in their head, they know that they've got that time to focus on their responsibilities, and they also have that time to focus on their study work. And it really helps the apprentice to sort of understand, one, exactly what they need to do that week so they can plan and they can organise. And two, it also releases that stress. And having that time put aside really allowed me as an apprentice to focus on my different responsibilities.
Thank you, Hannah. Some great points there. And I think one of the takeaways from me is that just how important the induction is. It can sometimes be, you think about all the different things you can do for engagement, and there's lots and lots of talk out there, some of them quite sort of wild and wacky, but actually getting those fundamentals right at the beginning makes such a huge difference. So thank you, Hannah, for sharing that. And just to the audience as well listening in, we will make sure we have a Q&A section at the end. So if any questions come up for you as we're talking to the different panelists, please do put your questions through and we'll get through as many as we can at the end of the session. And if you have any thoughts and reflections, please do share those through the chat. Lovely. So Angelica, if I can go to you next, could you share your experience in gaining We Invest in Apprentices accreditation?
Well, basically, our program manager, Daryl Williams, actually worked with investors and people over the last 20 years. And when he worked with Laval, for example, he was integral in obtaining a gold standard accreditation. And when he was working for CITB, he actually actively promoted the initiative to his clients. So he therefore has a very strong track record of seeing firsthand the benefits of the accreditation. So when Denise from Investors and People approached him about participating in their pilot program, which was the We Invest in People Apprentices accreditation, Daryl naturally jumped at the opportunity. There are several reasons why we felt Apprentice would specifically benefit from the accreditation. The company has undergone several significant changes over the last few years. A new program manager joined, which was Daryl, in 2018. And there were a number of operational and strategic improvements which were made. And as we know, when there are changes in a company, it causes a lot of uncertainty with clients and stakeholders. And we believe that acquiring this accreditation would go a long way in providing and proving to our stakeholders that we have that reassurance that the changes which were implemented have actually been positive ones. An example we had to overcome were some historical reputational issues we had with the quality of our former apprentices. For us, the well-being of our apprentices is at the heart of our organization, and almost all of our efforts are concentrated at recruiting the best candidates and ensuring they're well supported during their time with us. And this comes across very clearly in the feedback we received from the Investors and People reports, which is fantastic for us because it shows that we were and are on the right path. I think the most rewarding thing for us was the fact that the Investors and People reports highlighted to us that, one, our apprentices believe that we are an excellent provider of apprenticeships. An amazing 100% of apprentices agreed that we considered their well-being over the course of their apprenticeship, and the apprentices have all a voice and we listen to them. So that was fantastic feedback for us. And this was truly a great assessment for us, as it proved to us that our efforts were indeed being noticed by apprentices, and our efforts were considered to be of a platinum standard when benchmarked against other companies by an external accredited company. And that was really fantastic for us.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. And Emily, if I can come to you for your advice on how to increase engagement with apprentices and give them the best possible experience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, probably what I would say, and Angelica mentioned it as well, is the well-being aspect. And I think as you recruiting them in a community, or helping them to feel like they're part of the community, and that's what the association sort of attempts to do, is sort of recognising that need, that actually perhaps as an undergraduate going to university, you've got a support mechanism, perhaps as somebody in workplace learning with others, you've got a support mechanism, but actually a lot of apprentices don't. And even if you're an experienced hire in a large organisation, you might be one of a team of people and you're the only apprentice, and not really thinking that people appreciate that work and study balance. You could be in a smaller size business and actually responsible for all things apprenticeships and on your own, and feeling quite vulnerable and isolated. So that well-being aspect is really important to us as well. So at the association, we're a UK-wide social and professional networking platform, if you like, for apprentices, helping apprentices to be part of an online community. So apprentices at the association can connect by programme, they can connect by industry, they can connect by group that they identify with. And the basis of it is the benefits of social learning to attainment. So you know, when we've been doing our research and looking at the need for this, there's a couple of things that I would point to. One is the Education Endowment Foundation. They did quite a lot of research on social learning, and actually found that when you couple that with the technical curriculum, which obviously training providers and employers do, actually the output is much more positive. And I was sort of reading about at Harvard Business School, who had also set up an online program, and as part of an experiment had allowed participants to be part of an online community where they encouraged collaboration. And actually the results of that sort of surpassed expectations, because what people were able to do via social learning was discover for themselves, learn differently, sometimes as a better substitute, if you like, for the experts they were learning from. And actually their completion rates and their engagement rates and satisfaction was far higher. So I would definitely advocate sort of social learning, or being able to create a culture of social learning, as something that any employer or provider would want to do as part of that programme, to help with the attainment, but also to help with the experience as well. I mean, apart from social learning, apprentices feedback to us exactly what Hannah was talking about, which is the importance of having information all the way throughout the journey, not just onboarding and induction, but at really pivotal points like mid-programme, where your motivation might be dipping a bit, to the end of programme where actually we know that's really stressful. And actually one of the most frequently visited pages on our own website is around endpoint assessment. So, you know, at pivotal points, being able to proactively give that support is something that apprentices really want. And it's support on personal matters as well, actually. So some of our members have fed back to us that it doesn't have to be a bit of technical know-how, it doesn't have to be how do you successfully get through endpoint assessment, but actually apprentices more so than ever are facing personal issues which aren't necessarily the role of the employer provider to put right, but are still impacting their apprenticeship. If you can imagine, you know, you've got caring responsibilities at home, or you're moving house, or you're trying to budget. So there's all these sort of social aspects that actually to build into a programme, it would encourage success, I think, successful outcomes for people. Before I came, I did sort of poll some of our apprentice members, and what they said was sort of important to them in getting a successful outcome. And, you know, it is help around assessment, so making sure that there's time aside to plan for that properly. It is help with, I suppose, navigating support and where to access that support. It is help, like Hannah said, putting time aside to help them sufficiently complete the apprenticeship work, because some of that stress is being caused because there simply isn't time. So how do you carve that out? How do you look for opportunities that help them to achieve work objectives at the same time as their apprenticeship objectives? So really crucially, the role of line manager in all of that, helping them to feel valued, but also helping to support where they really need it, which it might be just knocking on the door and saying, I need some more time for my apprenticeship work. It's not easy, but that, you know, that's what they say they want. And actually, it's not just line managers. Apprentices tell us actually to have the whole organisation engaged, like Angelique will have found, the whole organisation from top down, so everybody really understands what an apprentice needs is really important. It's not just about educating line managers, but actually everybody across the business being aware, and business taking ownership of that is essential. So they're just a few bits from our apprentice members that, if you know, people on the call or wider are thinking of what can we do to make sure our apprentices have successful outcomes, then there's some of the things I would advocate anyway, based on our experience.
Thank you, Emily. It's really helpful and great to have you here as the voice as well of so much research. Hannah, I just wanted to go back to you, if that's okay. I think obviously we're seeing a theme through this conversation around supporting wellbeing and perhaps wider life events for apprentices going through schemes. In your experience, and maybe from the experience of your peers, what's made a difference to you in terms of support?
So I definitely, as I previously said, is having that relationship with your line manager and being able to openly speak and ask questions. And again, like Emily said about your personal life, is openly be able to speak about that, and for them to also value them conversations back and not just shut them down, and sort of have that culture where you can openly speak. I think that's really important. But also allowing in the organisation to have peer-to-peer conversations and peer-to-peer work. So when I started as an apprentice, there was 2 other apprentices in the organisation, and I was able to talk to them about their experience. Obviously, 1 as an apprentice, but 2 as an apprentice with my employer. And that gave me opportunities to obviously ask questions, to see what their experience is, and then also to obviously they can ask questions back to me, but also to sort of find out opportunities in the organisation and to see what support they've had. So then I can then talk to my line manager about maybe having the same support. I think it's really important to also provide that opportunity, again, as Emily said, for the whole organisation to speak and understand what an apprentice needs. I had my line manager email out to the whole organisation if there was any opportunities for me to collaborate across the organisation and take part in different projects and different activities to go towards my off-the-job training, because this obviously 20% is quite a lot of hours, and it can be quite difficult to sort of find opportunities and obviously meet that target. So having my line manager go out to the organisation to see what opportunities were out there, it really gave me that support in understand, you know, I've got these opportunities, and I can obviously again work and be supported by fellow employees and colleagues.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, it sounds like that support network around you is just so important, isn't it?
Definitely.
And Angelica, if I can go back to you, can you tell us a little bit more about what areas you've seen the biggest improvement in, maybe working with the We Invest in Apprentices framework?
I think basically the accreditation has been a fantastic vehicle in that it formally recognizes the fact that our policies, procedures, and ethos are to a very high standard. It's gone a long way in strengthening and reinforcing our reputation within the construction industry as an apprenticeship company that's truly dedicated to our apprentices' well-being and their success. We've observed that it has boosted confidence in our construction industry partners, which has resulted in increased inquiries into hiring apprentices through the shared apprenticeship model. And consequently, we've actually increased our new host contractors, and even some of our old past contractors that have been absent for a period have come back on board, which is fantastic. Many of our contractors have also recognized the benefits of being associated with an accredited company during the tendering process, as they can include us as a solution in meeting their TRNT commitments or their targeted recruitment and training commitments. They also acknowledge that they get good quality apprentices, good value, and a good service from us. For our apprentices, it's given them reassurance that we are passionately committed to their well-being and their success. And we can see that is rubbed off on them because they're actually putting a more concerted effort into completing their apprenticeship, which is a really great result for us.
Brilliant. And what's next for you? How is achieving this accreditation feeding into your strategic thinking?
We rely on public funding, and we're always on the lookout for new investment opportunities. And having received a platinum accreditation from a certified external body gives you that credibility when putting forward business cases. It also illustrates to the potential investor that we are a serious company that has stood up to the rigorous of a third-party assessment and came out with flying colors. So the accreditation also places us in good stead when bidding for tenders. And, you know, having received confirmation that we already have policies and procedures of a platinum standard in place, it gives us the confidence to consider exploring new avenues. We're actively talking to other sectors to establish whether our model is transferable, for example, like the care and hospitality sectors. And if successful, this would open up a brand new revenue stream for us, which would be really great. Furthermore, you know, we're using this feedback we receive from the report to engage with our stakeholders, where it be at board discussions or at our advisory panels with our stakeholders. We use this feedback to shape the future of our apprenticeship offering. And improvements which we are currently pursuing is to increase our apprentices' rate of pay as well as travel allowance. And as a platinum company, we believe we should pay wages that reflect this ethos, and we hope to be able to implement this as soon as possible. I think lastly, we are aware that we'll be reassessed by investors and people in the imminent future. And this actually helps us to ensure that we focus on continuous improvement by benchmarking ourselves against our former feedback. And therefore we can strive to achieve improvements which have been set out for us. And we're really looking forward to this assessment to see how far we've grown and developed over the past few years.
Amazing. Yeah, I think the eternal quest for improvement is something that all of our sort of highest performing organisations have in common. So Paul, I don't know if you'd like to share some thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's hard to improve upon what we've heard from the practitioners in the room, because I think they've all given really excellent examples. I think the thing for me is being really clear about what good looks like, understanding what you know is the key to success for a good apprenticeship scheme in your organisation and working towards that. That's why the government asked us to develop a framework so that organisations could see what good looked like, and therefore they had something to benchmark themselves against. And that way, if you're constantly checking and reviewing your progress against that standard, then you know if you're doing the right things, especially when it's based as ours is on feedback from the apprentices themselves. And that gives you a really good indication that you're making good progress. So for me, that's the only sort of additional add that I would make to what everyone else has done.
Thanks, Paul. And to the attendees, obviously we've got this superb panel here today, jam-packed full of knowledge and experience. So if you've got questions to post, please do put those through. But before we go to the Q&A, if I can just go to each member of the panel for you to share your, I guess, top takeaway, or if you do nothing else, do this type tip on how everybody listening can make sure that every apprentice has the best chance of success. So does anybody want to go first? Okay, Paul.
I'll go first. I think the key thing is that they're well managed. I would say that that's a really, and quite often that's underlooked. So if an apprentice has a really good manager and a good mentor that looks after their welfare and has helped them work through the programme, that makes a massive difference. And I think sometimes that's an area that could do with more focus. And you need to support your managers to do that. So make sure that you just don't drop an apprentice on your management, that they're well trained and they understand what support they're going to get and how they're going to, what expectations are upon them to manage the apprentice well.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to go in order of the squares on my screen. Emily, if I can come to you next.
Oh, I knew you were going to come to me next. And I was thinking, I can't think of one thing because there are so many variables. And particularly if you look at research around why people don't complete a programme or why people stay on the programme, line manager has got to be one of the biggest ones out there. So making sure well managed is definitely that. But if you think also programmes have lengthened in duration over the course of the last few years, so often it's difficult to maintain that, I suppose, commitment to the programme. That's one thing to be mindful of. We've talked about the benefits of having a buddy system or peers, thinking about doing that outside of the workplace through an online community or something like that would also be really beneficial. So giving people that opportunity for that social learning. I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, feeling valued and understanding where the apprenticeship fits in the big sort of scheme of things. So where does it fit in my company? Where does it fit in my sector? Where does it fit with my peers? So you understand where it's headed, making that progression and what's at the end really clear is also important. So sorry, Beth, failed on that one, not just one, lots of things. Really.
I'll let you off.
Thank you.
And Hannah, I'll go to you next.
Again, I guess I can echo exactly what Paul and Emily have said. But I think, again, it is to do with relationship between the apprentice and the line manager, and just creating that environment where they can have open and honest conversation. And that allows the apprentice again, to speak up if they do have any issues, and if they are struggling with their workload, or if they have got any problems. And then the line manager then obviously again being able to speak to the apprentice about what they can then do to help and support them, and not just, you know, pushing the problems to the side, and really having some open, honest and valuing the apprentice is really important.
Thanks, Hannah. And Angelica, you've got the tough slot.
There's quite a few things I can add from kind of a training provider's perspective, where we're providing the apprenticeships. And I think it ties in a lot with what Hannah said earlier, is really developing a culture of support for the apprentices. The induction for us is extremely important. We've developed something called a perfect start checklist, where we literally go through all the tick boxes to make sure that the onboarding of our apprentices are just our top priority. We assist them with, from the beginning, you know, the recruitment process is very important to us to select the right candidates. We then go through to supporting them with their CSCS application. So we provide them, you know, educational support, sitting down, helping them to get through that qualification, acquiring the CSCS card, which is important in the construction industry. And then we just support them throughout the whole apprenticeship. We were quite fortunate this year that we qualified for funding from the Welsh Government from a dedicated apprenticeship coordinator, which has really fantastic for us, because it's taken, I wouldn't say the burden, but just the additional resources that you need to put in to support our apprentices. And that was identified by the government to provide that support to us as a scheme. And this dedicated apprenticeship coordinator is able to give our apprentices pastoral care on an ongoing basis throughout their journey with us. And this ensures our apprentices complete their framework qualifications on time, and their well-being is monitored and assistance is provided to them where required. You know, for us to increase our apprenticeship engagement, we love celebrating the success of our apprentices on our social channels. So we've got something which we call our apprentice completed posts, which we put out, and it's extremely engaging. People love it. We celebrate the fact that we secure full-time employment for our apprentices. In fact, we're really proud. Our annual report just came out recently, confirming that 80% of our apprentices complete their frameworks and 100% go on to do full-time employment. And that's a fantastic achievement for us as a company. We also try and encourage our apprentices to be ambassadors for our scheme. So we basically ask them to promote the scheme to their hosts, their families and friends. And we have something that's called a referral program, where we give them a monetary award if they refer to us as successful apprentices that roll on our program. And also we rely on our apprentices to make a good impression to their hosts that they're working with, because this promotes a positive reputation on us and reflects well on us. And this helps word of mouth recommendation to spread, which helps us increase our hosts. And the more hosts we have, the more apprenticeship opportunities we can provide to the learners out there. And this ties into the fact that we're aiming to reduce the skills shortage in the construction industry, which is our ultimate goal.
Fantastic. Well, I hope everyone in the audience had pen and paper or were typing furiously away to take notes. Great to see some questions coming through. So what I'll do is try and get through as many as I possibly can before we hit time up. But I'm sure myself and the rest of the panel will be happy if anybody wants to connect with them on LinkedIn or follow up after this and address any further questions. If you're anything like me, sometimes my best questions come, unfortunately, 10 minutes after the session has ended. So yeah, do get in touch. So I saw a question come through here. Brilliant question from Carol. Apprentices are of all ages and from different life experiences these days. How can managers make the most of supporting that diverse apprentice profile? Any ideas on that? We need a buzzer.
Yeah, I think it's the same principles that apply to support any member of your team going through training programs. You know, because it requires, particularly with apprenticeship, it requires time off the job. It requires people to organise their work and their training. So, you know, everybody's got different needs in relation to that, and it's just about the manager tailoring that support to the person and the individual to make sure that they're giving them every chance of succeeding, and making sure that there isn't any reason for them to drop out or drop off, and just keep motivating them and encouraging them to complete. I think that's certainly what I found helpful anytime I was doing part-time study and working at the same time.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. I think it's got to be personalised, and I think what we said earlier was, you know, everybody's got personal circumstances or things going on in their lives that impact their apprenticeship. It's nothing to do with the apprenticeship itself, but it still impacts it. So line managers can, by taking time out to understand what some of those things are and actually pointing out sort of supporting networks, would help manage that, I think.
I think for us, we basically set up quite regular reviews with our apprentices, where we sit down with them and actively engage with them and just monitor their progress. And if anything is flagged up and we need to signpost them to different websites or different resources, it's that, you know, one-on-one sessions that are very important to helping those apprentices succeed.
Fabulous, thank you. And another brilliant question has come through here, although they haven't put a name to it. Do you have any tips on supporting apprentices in a hybrid working or fully remote working scenario?
I think that's a brilliant question. It's something that comes up a lot, because a lot of people are concerned about, you know, people like us that are probably most of us on this are home working at the moment. But you know, how did people get the learning of being next to someone and supporting them? So I think depending on how your organisation is structured, if you do have a much higher degree of remote and flexible working now, it requires you dial up the engagement with the apprentice, you know, 100-fold to make sure that they're getting every single bit of support that they need, and making the effort to create that face-to-face time so that they're not missing out in the kind of water cooler conversation, or you know, finding alternative ways to make sure that those conversations take place, that they feel supported and not isolated. So for middle-aged people like me who've got their own house and got an office at the bottom of the garden, home working is great. But if you're young and you're just starting work and you're maybe having to do stuff like this, you know, at the edge of your bed, in your own bedroom, it can be really challenging and not really engaging. So I think there's a lot to be done on this agenda to make sure that people, particularly young people starting apprenticeships, are not disadvantaged because of it. I think it can be done, but it needs careful thought.
Thanks, Paul. And I can see you've hopped off mute, Hannah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think having weekly or you know, bi-weekly meetings or daily check-ins with your apprentice can be really important, just to provide them that opportunity if there is any problems or if they do need any support, then they have their meetings one-to-one with you to highlight any issues.
Great advice. And I think, you know, what I've noticed is that you just can't assume.
Yeah.
So everyone's got very different experiences of working from home environments, different priorities about why they might like to come into an office and be with people. So I think getting as much information as you can about what's going on in people's lives, whether it's through surveys, focus groups, one-to-ones, manager catch-ups, is all really helpful. Any other thoughts from the panel on this one?
For us, it's quite a difficult one because we work in the construction industry, so our apprentices are expected to be on site. But we did go through a period, especially when the colleges closed down and the students were required to log in from, you know, virtual classrooms and do their own kind of homework and assessments. From the interviews we've carried out, we found that a lot of our apprentices actually struggled with that aspect of it. And I think it's like Hannah says, it's just to have those regular check-ins. A lot of our apprentices were furloughed at a stage, so we did have well-being calls set up, so weekly just checking in on the apprentices and just being able to offer assistance where the opportunity arises.
Yeah, I think from our perspective of the association, a lot of our members want to go back into the office, is what they're telling us. They have missed the learning that can be done when you sit side by side with people, but it's not always practical. And I think that regular check-in is really important, as is sort of sharing experiences, because then we're actually seeing people starting to share their experiences as they're going back into the classroom or back into work. I saw a post the other day on the communities. I'm just about to go back into university as part of my apprenticeship for the day, a bit nervous. How's everybody else feeling? So I think it's just, you know, not everybody's in a similar situation, boat, so it's just making people aware that it's okay to raise it.
Thank you. I think it's a great point, Emily. And I'm always strongly in favour of bringing feelings and emotions into a conversation at work. So yeah, let's make it normal to say we're feeling a bit weird, perhaps, about going back into an office, or anything that you feel is okay. Brilliant. So I hope that's been helpful for the person that put that question through. Got a few more to whiz through. So one here on completion that's come through from Michelle. She said she's in the process of recruiting an apprentice for the first time. And do apprentices, in your experience, usually stay with the company after they get their qualification?
I hope so. That's just definitely the, yeah, I mean, providing obviously there's a permanent job for them to go to. We know in some industries that's not always possible, but yeah, absolutely everything I ever come across suggests that the apprentice would likely be more committed at the end of it to the employer. Should be no reason why they would want to leave, provided obviously that at the completion it fulfills everything that they were expecting. Hannah, you stayed, you know, with World Skills as well. So yeah, absolutely, I would say that I would hope that would happen.
I think from our perspective, we're a shared apprenticeship provider. So by the very nature, our apprentices get moved around quite from different contractors between different hosts. But what we found is that this is actually kind of a long interview process, as they are building relationships, they're developing relationships within the construction industry. And at the end of those apprenticeships, they have that network of employers they can approach. And we found that this has been extremely successful. As I've mentioned, 100% of our apprentices have gone on to secure their full-time employment with one of their previous hosts or current host, so that work opportunities are available there. And because that apprentice has that relationship with that host, they're more likely to get that position and the job.
Brilliant, thank you. And we're in a flow of amazing questions. So Stuart's put through a question in the chat, and that is, how do you feel that apprenticeships can support and be integrated into an organisation's ESG agenda?
Say that again, Beth.
Sorry, it's because I'm excited, I'm talking quickly. How do you feel that apprenticeships can support and be integrated into an organisation's ESG agenda? So Stuart, if you're listening, if you'd like to expand the acronym ESG.
Yeah, I don't want to assume what that means. Does anyone else on the panel know what ESG means? No, I don't know. No. I think we were all hoping that somebody else would know. Speak up. I have to confess, I don't know what that is.
I would have assumed, yeah, environment, social, governmental.
Ah, I see, right.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Governance. Yeah, so how can apprenticeship schemes support with those initiatives?
I think it definitely supports this social and governmental, because it's a government priority to, you know, use apprenticeships as a key part of its levelling up agenda. And to address the skills gaps and shortages that's in the economy. So it definitely does that. You know, I know a lot of employers are actually rebranding some of their apprenticeships to make them more in line with the environmental agenda. So I know a lady that runs a building company in Glasgow, and instead of advertising for rough casters, she's now greening the job description, that actually what they're doing is putting insulation around old buildings and rough casting as well, but they're helping to help Scotland become carbon neutral by I think 2030, 2050. So they're actually calling them green careers rather than just, you know, a career in the building trade, because they're getting back to the core purpose of what the job does. So I certainly think there's more of a as part of actually marketing these apprenticeships as much as anything else, that, you know, they're contributing to the green agenda, so that people that are more purpose driven can see that it is making an impact.
I think for us, we've always been focused, and kind of one of our core priorities is to provide local jobs for local people. So when we hire our apprentices, we make sure that, in as far as possible, that they are in a geographical area within the site and the college, so that we can reduce their carbon footprint of traveling and you know, going to sites and stuff. And I think from a social perspective is, once we can secure jobs for those apprentices, they then have the opportunity to feed their families, to support the local businesses there. So you have that kind of income support coming in, improving the social aspects of the environment. I mean, we are funded by partly the Valley Task Force area, which is kind of the lower social areas within the Welsh geographical areas. And you know, we focus on improving the quality of lives for those people. So from a social perspective, you know, just providing jobs for local people is basically one of our priorities.
Fantastic, thank you. And we haven't got time to get through the other questions, I'm afraid. We've had some brilliant ones come through, and I can see there's just a couple that we haven't quite made it to. But what I would suggest, as I said before, is do feel free to connect with our panel. Also keep an eye out, if you're not subscribed to it already, on the Investors in People mailing list. So we do these events fairly frequently, and there's a huge amount of content and advice as well on our knowledge pages on our website. But before we sign off, a huge thank you to our panel. It's been brilliant, and such a really useful range of perspectives as well on this important topic. So thank you for sharing your time with us. And thank you to the audience as well for all of your interaction and fantastic questions.